Kathy Holloway Hill continues her series on mental health.
This crisis is first self-awareness, tuning into what your thoughts are and your feelings are and how they help you or hurt you, and then managing the ones that are hurting you.
Tonight on Living by Design.
Living by Design with host Kathy Holloway Hill. Kathy is a strong, powerful voice. She entertains, informs, and inspires her audiences everywhere she goes.
Hello, I'm Kathy Holloway Hill, and welcome to another episode in our mental and emotional health awareness series. I am absolutely honored and thrilled to have with us today Mr. Daniel Goleman, who is the creator of a massively important area in all of our lives, and that's emotional intelligence. And since he is the creator, I am not going to steal his thunder. And Mr. Goleman, first of all, welcome to Living by Design, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so now, please just talk a little bit about you, your background. How did you come up with the creation of this brilliant idea of emotional intelligence?
Well, I started out as a psychologist, actually. I got a PhD at Harvard and then went into science journalism very early on. People at Harvard were scandalized at the time. They wouldn't be today. And I ended up at the New York Times. And while I was at the New York Times, my job was to look at the academic journals and to see what was interesting, what's new, what's relevant to our lives, and then turn that into an article in a newspaper. And I came upon an academic article written by a fellow who's now the president of Yale, Peter Salovey. It was called Emotional Intelligence. I looked at that. I said, that's an amazing phrase because it sounds like oxymoron. You can't be intelligent and emotional at the same time. Then I realized, actually, it could be being intelligent about emotion. And that was a very important concept. So I wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence, which brought together a lot of different evidence from many parts of what I'd been covering at the New York Times, including new brain science about how the emotional centers of the brain interact with the cognitive centers at the top and either allow us to be at our best cognitively, mentally, most effective, or at our worst. And that has a lot to do with what we're all facing today, which is more stress than ever. There's a kind of a mental health crisis. I think it's wonderful, Kathy, that you're having this series on mental health because we need it now more than ever. And one of the actually two of the key abilities of emotional intelligence that can help each of us manage this crisis is first, self-awareness, tuning into what your thoughts are and your feelings are and how they help you or hurt you, and then managing the ones that are hurting you, the disruptive ones, the disturbing thoughts, the self-blame or the anger or the whatever it is. We don't really need that. It gets in our way. In fact, research is showing that the more upset we are, the more narrow the bandwidth of our ability to use whatever talents we have. So we're crippling ourselves when we think those thoughts that get us upset. And depression and anxiety, it turns out, are fueled by thoughts that create depression and anxiety. So what we need to do is realize, hey, we don't have to believe our thoughts, not those ones anyway. We can counter them. We can argue back, So, you tell yourself, or I tell myself, I'm just no good, or I'm no good at this. And then you counter that. You say, I don't have to believe that. Oh, remember all the times I was good at that. Because in the moment when you're in the grip of those negative thoughts, it's harder to remember the times that you actually did fine. And that's what you want to bring to mind because that counters it. So we can do a lot inside with self-awareness and self-management.
Oh my goodness. You have just really not only hit the nail on the head, you just pretty much pushed that nail all the way through the other end of the wall. Because you are so correct. Self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness. Because how many times have I heard people say, well, it's their fault. Well, they shouldn't be doing this. Well, he's a terrible person. If only he would just go away. And if only.
Right.
Like we have no control.
Well, actually, that if only can be a cue to you to look at what's going on here. Oh man, I'm giving myself the worst messaging. I'm like saying I have no control when actually you have a lot of control. If you would realize it and use it, you can manage your own mind. And that is the key to mental health.
Yeah, and those are actually the first two steps, self-awareness and self-management.
Exactly.
So I am going to ask you just those two pieces for right now, because as you stated, and as we both know, we are in the middle of a mental health crisis, not just here in our nation, but across the world globally. And there are so many people globally who are going to be seeing this, and they need to hear from a strong, influential figure like yourself. So because you wrote the book on it, how can we begin the process of one, being self-aware, and then start managing that?
The person who's put this together really well is actually not me, it's my wife, Tara Bennett Goleman, in her book, Emotional Alchemy, where she blended mindfulness, which is a way to heighten your self-awareness, with cognitive therapy, which is a way to catch those negative thoughts and talk back to them and change them for the better. There's a whole methodology, and I really recommend that combination of being mindful, which means tuning into what's going on right now. What am I telling myself? What am I feeling? What are my thoughts making me feel? And then using that understanding, oh man, I'm going in the wrong direction, to do something about it. And that's where cognitive therapy comes in. It's a set of tools, mental tools, for talking back to your depression, talking back to your anxiety, calming yourself, getting yourself so you feel more up rather than down. And you can do that through the mind. The subtitle of her book is How the Mind Can Heal the Heart. I think that's spot on, because it tells you that you can take control of your thoughts and your feelings by realizing where they're driving you, saying, I don't want to go there, and then saying, I don't have to believe that thought, and countering them with counter arguments like, Aaron Beck, who is a psychiatrist at Penn who developed cognitive therapy, has a whole host of things you can tell yourself when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling down, which are antidotes to what are called depressionogenic thoughts. That simply means thoughts that make us depressed. And it seems like, the way we look at the world, it's them out there that are making us depressed, or the situation, or something in ourselves that can't change. And cognitive therapy tells us it can change. Don't believe that you're just like you're telling yourself. All of us can get better. We can improve our mental health. We don't have to be anxious. We don't have to be depressed. You just have to know what to do.
Amen. That is so true. It starts with you and it begins with you and it ends with you. So We're going to take a quick break, Daniel, and we will be right back with more of this incredibly wonderful conversation. Hi, I'm Kathy Holloway Hill, and we are back here with Mr. Daniel Goleman, the best-selling author of the incredible book, Emotional Intelligence. And, Daniel, I just want to pick up where you left off when you were saying what you were saying, because it was very critical. And I just want to give a tiny little testimony here. And you talked about combining mindfulness and cognitive behavior therapy with those ugly thoughts. And I have learned I'm a psychologist, and I have learned all of that. And I have actually given my toxic negative thoughts that I don't want to be there a name. And I've given my healthy thoughts a name. So when the toxic stuff tries to creep in and say, oh, this person did this and they're not that and blah, 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 I say, Boa, go away. And the other name for the positive is Angel.
I
want to talk to you. Yeah, Boa, go away. Angel, I want to talk to you. And you know, that is really, as strange as it may sound, it has helped me.
You know, I don't know if you're aware of it. There's good research out of UCLA that says if you name your thoughts, the act of naming, if you name your feelings, rather, sorry, the act of naming itself changes energy in the brain so that the part of the brain that can think more clearly gets stronger and the part that gives you the toxic feelings gets weaker. So I think that's a wonderful method. Or you could say, oh, I'm feeling angry now, or I'm feeling anxious now, or I'm feeling a little down or depressed now. That very mental act, interestingly, has an effect on the brain. It's very important to be able to do that. So when you're mindful, it's not just noticing what you're feeling, it's naming it. That's another step you can take. Technically, it's called decentering. It means that you're no longer believing those thoughts, but you're seeing them just as thoughts. That gives you a lot of power you didn't have before.
Yes, absolutely. And I am a testimony to that because it does work. You are so right. Now, I know the other piece, because there's so much here and I just want to try to get it all in, is social awareness. Now, with everything that we're dealing with this mental health crisis, it is difficult for a lot of people out there, which is why I have you on today, to talk about social awareness, because social awareness does not mean being aware of this side versus that side and what these people are saying, versus what they're saying, and who's right and who's wrong, and all the misinformation and all the lies, and that does not mean that. It does not mean being aware of all the toxicity that's floating around this country and this world right now.
Sure, yeah.
So
actually,
tell us what it does mean.
It means how nourishing and healthy are your relationships. It starts with empathy. This is the key, like self-awareness is the key to managing your own emotions. Empathy is the key to managing your relationships, having healthy relationships. And there are three kinds of empathy. Kathy, I want to emphasize this. There's cognitive empathy, knowing how someone thinks about things. That helps you talk to them in language they'll understand. Emotional empathy, knowing what the person is feeling. This happens kind of naturally. We pick up what the other person is feeling. But the third kind, really important, it's called empathic concern. Technically, it means you are, it's based in the brain in the same part of circuitry that's a parent's love for a child. It's caring about the other person. It's having concern, ultimately it's compassion. It's not just that you're interested in what's in this relationship for me, but what can I do for the other person? This is what strengthens a bond. This is what makes someone feel they can trust you. This is what someone feels that they're close to you, that you're supporting them. They want to be with you. So having that concern is absolutely critical. And technically, it's called social awareness, but think of it as caring about the other person.
That fits very well in this series that I'm doing with your partner, in a marriage, or if you have a significant other. That is very critical because, sometimes households are divided right now with, the trying to manage COVID. I hate to say the C word, but people are torn between, should I get the vaccine? Should I not? And so this is very important that we're having this conversation, because what you just said is the key to having that healthy communication with your partner.
That's right. Right. And if your partner understands and knows in her heart or his heart that you really have their best interests as your concern, then they relax. They're not defensive. They're not argumentative. Then they open up to you. I had a visit the other day from my grandkids. They're 4 and 6, and my son and his wife. And one of the things that we established at the outset was, okay, what are the rules of this game now? I mean, we love each other. We like to hug each other. But, during this, maybe that's not so healthy. I'm in that age group where it's a little highly vulnerable. And they were concerned about me, and I really appreciated it. So they told their kids, when we're together, we're going to wear masks. So we wore masks. If we're outside, we don't need them. We went for a walk in the woods. That was fine. But when we're together inside, and it's out of concern for each other that we respect those boundaries, we respect those rules. So it's not that being concerned means you just give in to anything the other person wants. You can be very clear about what works for you and what doesn't work. And if they're concerned about you, they'll say, oh yeah, well, that makes sense to me. That's where you want to go.
And that makes perfect sense to me because, this codependency thing, it's just not healthy. I mean, you can't sacrifice, like you said, boundaries are critical, and you can't sacrifice what you feel and what you think versus what the other person feels or thinks. Both of you matter. And if you love each other, then I can't say it enough. Communication, communication, communication. It is the foundation. It is the key. And that's why that relationship management part of emotional intelligence is so critical.
Well, you said something very important I want to emphasize, and that is that it's not just that you give in to the other person, but you set boundaries. The word I want to focus on is self-sacrifice, because so many of us think that being compassionate means that we just give the other person anything they want. It shouldn't mean that. It should mean that you can set your own boundaries and explain to the other person why this is a boundary. For example, I told my family, look, I'm highly vulnerable to COVID transmission, so I'd appreciate it if you'd respect my boundaries. I mean, it's a different way of being together, but for now we have to do this. And they got it. And that made me feel really loved, actually, really cared about. But I had to say first what worked for me and what didn't. If I said, anything goes, that's the self-sacrificing stance, but I'm putting myself at risk, and so we have to be careful not to give too much, but to allow space too. Both are important.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And we are going to take another quick break, but we will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We are still here with the best-selling author of emotional intelligence, Mr. Daniel Goleman. And Daniel, I was thinking when we spoke during the break, I kind of got a thought in my head that I would like for you to just help our viewers understand. I have heard it said that your EQ, which is emotional intelligence, the short name for it, just like your IQ is your intelligence quotient, and the EQ is your emotional quotient. So I've heard it said that your EQ is a better indicator of the success you're going to have in life, more so than your IQ.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on how you're measuring success. If you're talking about academic success, I think IQ is much more important than EQ. But talk about the rest of life, your family life, your romantic life, actually your career success too. It turns out emotional intelligence matters more. Let me talk first about your career. The reason it matters more there is that there's a pretty high barrier, high threshold for entry in most careers. If you're going to be an electrician or a plumber or a nurse or a lawyer, whatever it is, you have to pass a lot of IQ heavy barriers to get there. And that means that there's much less variation among people that you're working with or competing with for success. On the other hand, emotional intelligence is largely, there's a huge range of that among people. By the way, any of us can get better. And at the end, I'm going to tell you how. But any of us can improve our emotional intelligence at any point in life. That's the good news. IQ, not so much. It's pretty much the same from childhood on. So when it comes to your romantic life to your relationships, your family life. It's all emotional intelligence. It's empathy. It's tuning in. It's having healthy relationships. It's maintaining your boundaries, as we were talking about, not being so self-sacrificing that you feel awful in the relationship, but you feel that you're being respected because you can communicate well. So your success in life varies depending on what part of your life, because there are many different domains. So when it comes to your academics, that's one thing, but when it comes to your personal life, quite another.
I could not agree more, because there's something that I typically say in my workshops, because I work with a lot of corporations also like yourself, and a lot of individual organizations and groups, and especially youth. And I always tell the person, please do not read my full bio, because I believe people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Ah, that's beautiful. I love that.
And I learned that in my career, because I could see the looks on people's faces when the bio would just go on and on, a TV show, and she's interviewed all of these celebrities, and she's a psychologist, and blah this and blah that. And the looks on their faces are just like, oh. And then when I start, forget all that. Yeah. First I cut it down. When I realized that, I told the MC, cut it down.
Sure.
And it worked out so much better, because after they realized that I really care about them enhancing their lives, them accomplishing their goals, them moving up, them getting better and not bitter. Right. Then they came up to me and they were interested in, so, where did you go to school? Or when were you in corporate America? And when did you step out and leave corporate America? Then they were interested. And I think that's critical.
Yeah, Kathy, I think you're absolutely right. People want to know who you are as a person. Do you care or you don't care? Are you someone who's depressed and anxious all the time? Or can you manage your emotion, your upsetting emotions? Can they have a nourishing relationship with you? And then if they're so interested, they can look into the other part. They may never even get there. It doesn't matter. It's really from the heart to the heart, I think. That's what matters.
I love speaking directly to the heart, because when you speak to someone's soul, just the essence of who they are, and you connect on that level, I don't like to use notes when I speak, because I like speaking from the heart, because it feels more sincere, more genuine.
Absolutely. And in fact, it can be more inspiring. People want to know who are you deep down? What matters to you? What gives your life meaning? And can you voice that in a way that resonates with me, with what I think life is about and gives meaning? And if you can do that, you really inspire people. You really move people. And, this is important if you're a parent with your kids, or you're a manager with your employees, or just about anybody, because you have that resonance, you have that connection, that heart to heart link.
Yes. And Daniel, let me just ask you, if you do come across someone that is very important in your life, a friend, say, and they are just adamant to hold on to their toxic beliefs and toxic feelings, what should you do with that? Just walk away and say, okay, well, you can have that. I'm gonna move on.
Yeah, I think you're not going to give up on them, not right away, for sure, because you care about them. Right. So you might say, there's another way of thinking about this. You might give them some alternatives. You might let them know maybe some methods. You might say, hey, did you ever try this mindfulness? I hear it can help situations like that, and give them a chance to try it out. What you're doing is opening up options for them.
Yeah, I like that. As a matter of fact, I like it so much. I want to know more about you. Do you have any projects coming up? Do you have any resources that you could share with our viewers? What brilliance can you leave with us when we're done here today?
Well, as it happens, I've got a set of primers on the 12 aspects of emotional intelligence. self-awareness, managing your emotions in 4 different ways, like keeping your eye on your goals or staying positive no matter what happens, adapting, empathizing, tune into other people. I have a primer on each one of these. It's called Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence, and it's available at Key Step Media, one word, keystepmedia.com, Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence. If you want to learn more, I recommend it. It's a beginning.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm assuming if they just, have been living on their rock and never heard of you, they can purchase your book, Emotional Intelligence, on Amazon or online. Do you have a social media presence?
Daniel Goleman.info. One word, Daniel Goleman, Goleman. That's how you spell it. One word, .info. If you do LinkedIn, some people do, some people don't. But if you do, I've got a free monthly newsletter, my latest thinking. You can sign up for that. I welcome you. So there are many, many ways to learn more about emotional intelligence. Good luck to you all.
Thank you, sir. Oh, my goodness. You have been a wealth of knowledge, and I thank you so much for joining us today. And we thank you for joining us in our mental and emotional health series. Thank you. Have a good evening, and we'll see you same time next week. Good night, everyone.